I thought I'd start by saying that earlier this year I nearly died. I came within 2 days of dying and was very ill. And as I got well, I decided I wanted to start collecting some of my work together because I've been working as a photographer for 40 years. So what we have here tonight is not all Woolsheds, don't worry, there will be some. And it's a bit of a collection of some of the other things that I do as well. I've been photographing since I was about 15, I'm 16. I fell in love with photography, I fell in love with the lens, as they say. And I also had a passion for, I don't know, I grew up sort of mistrustful of advertising in the way they'd throttle a Coca-Cola ad to a Marlboro ad in those days or something like that. And I didn't like the way that sort of advertising tended to try and brainwash people. And I just wanted to show things and feed the truth and not some sort of, I know I was only 16 at the time, but that's the way I felt anyway. And I sort of really set upon doing documentary work, but it became a signature of most of the work that I've done to date, is that most of this work has been done without any manipulation. It is just done using the elements that exist. And I'm not one of these people that get in and manipulate photoshops and add things to photographs and take things out. It's what you see is what you get. It's what I saw. I do play around with contrast and saturation a little bit on the computer, much as the old darkroom people used to in the old days. I just used to wander around with a camera. I always carry a camera, and I think the value of carrying a camera is that you often get things which we all see, but you tend to record them. Then 10 years later or 15 years later, something will become historic. You can photograph a shed, by the side of the road on the way into Bearsdale, and it's been there for 50 years, and then one day somebody comes down and knocks it down and puts a house up there. And 10 years later, your kid says, "Oh, that house, how long's that been there?" Or you say to your kid, "Oh, there used to be a beautiful old shed there." And they've got no visual marker for that. And I think it's important to record things as you see them. In the old days, you used to be able to go to the pub, you used to be able to go anywhere with a camera and take a photo. People didn't tend to worry too much, which was wonderful. I'd pop my head into cars and say hello and take photographs. I don't know who he is. He's probably someone very famous, but I've never found out who he is. So if anyone here knows, please let me know. Occasionally I'd work with other photographers, and this was done when I was on work experience, and a band called the Police came to town, and the police had the police with them, and I thought it was kind of funny, the police and the police. And if you look at the gentleman on the left, he's actually got those headphones on, and he's got a really cool new device called a Walkman, and he carries it to listen to music on. And there's a bit of history in itself, when you think where that whole technology's gone. That was really
It's sting in the middle.
That's sting in the middle, that's correct. And there's an airline in the back for ansett.
What is that?
I've photographed quite a few concerts over the years too, and had a bit of fun, and took Keith Richards at the Rolling Stones at Keon Tennis Ground, and they used to have concerts at Keon. Rod Stewart and Ronnie Wood, who went on to join the Rolling Stones as well, the two great rock and rollers.
Rod Stewart.
That's Rod Stewart. Who else would it be? Ralph Nader, who wrote a book on Safe Energy Speed, became the greatest consumer advocate in America. Ran for president, was it 2004 thereabouts, and probably tipped Al Gore out from becoming president. They split the left vote, and George Bush got in, and the rest is history. I got involved in politics as a student. I guess my politics were at the left, which is probably a little bit strange for someone who ended up photographing Woolsheds and shearers and being out in the country all those years. But,
not if you work with the ABC.
What's that? This is today, Melbourne, Doc Whitlam got sacked, and there was sort of quite a bit of rioting in the street in South Melbourne, and that's going on, and it's really held together by the sign that says Fraser causes chaos. Which is a little bit weird, and when you think back on that as well, because sort of towards the end of Power's rule, Fraser had become the darling of the left because that's all he had. So, I heard Paul Keating and Phil Hogan playing live the other day, and he inserted a sentence from Philip Adams, and he said, were you ever bored? And he he said, oh, did I ever ball? Of course I didn't. And I thought, well, he mightn't have balled, but he came very close to it one time. Just about had to bite the lip. John Howard and family at the 2004 elections, and I say to a lot of people, it's a sort of photo that if you really like the Howards, you go, that's a very nice photo. And if you really hate the Howards, you go, that's a great photo. It's really in the interpretation of what you see there. Gianna Guzman, who became a Nobel Peace Prize winner, the president of East Timor, and was wiping a tear from the eye of a refugee in Melbourne Town Hall just after East Timor was liberated. I spent an hour just following him around the hall. Nelson Mandela, again at Melbourne Town Hall. I used to do a lot of work for the city of Melbourne back when I was doing more commercial photography, and I had great access to these events when they came, which was really good. And you know, the photo makes it to me because you've got a broken chain up above him. It's fairly symbolic. The European Embassy asked me to photograph be the official photographer for Condoleezza Rice during the Commonwealth Games, and I tracked her for the afternoon. And I actually got to ride in one of those convoys you see on TV that have the police on the outside and the helicopter over, and it's 13 cars and you don't stop at any traffic lights, and it was rather fun. I'll tell you what, you could have used that on the Monash Freeway this morning. One of my other great passions is hot-air ballooning. I ran into a guy called Kip Saunders in 1994 or 93, and Kip operates a company called Global Ballooning in the Yarra Valley, and I went up to the Yarra Valley. And that was the start of a long friendship and a lot of balloon riding. I've done over 200 trips today, and I'm sort of getting to the point where I think I need to be putting a book together on hot-air ballooning in Australia. That's taken out in the Yarra Valley, and we've done some special trips with hot-air ballooning across the Grampians a couple of times, and last July we went up to Lake Eyre and we ran the balloons with 2 balloons across Lake Eyre. It was actually the subject of an Australian story. He had a collision on a motorbike last year, at the beginning of the year, and he nearly died. He was very bent up, but he managed to do his first flight. He was still a bit wobbly on his legs when he did it, and we took 2 balloons over Lake Eyre. And I actually went up to 10,000 feet in an open basket, which was, that didn't even occur to me at the time that I'd done something different. I was too busy photographing, but it was quite lovely. But I've taken quite a few photographs of hot-air balloons, and they're beautiful subjects, providing they've got too much advertising on them, to photograph. That's Kit there at Moorabbin Airport. We're just flying into the airport one morning. And he wanted to put a balloon together that just sort of showed his philosophy, which is love of life. And he designed that balloon instead of taking a big corporate check for putting a logo on it. He just designed that himself and put it up there, and he's pretty proud of it. And there's a corporate logo for it. That's the flying pot, which is a special shape balloon. My picture is balloon. That's taken over Cranbourne, and you get these magic days occasionally where the clouds are right, and the cloud base is at 1,000 feet, so you can actually pump the balloon through the cloud. Not technically legally, but we do. And then you just sit the balloons on the cloud. You've got to be able to come down under the clouds and not hit the ground, so you need that 1,000 feet clearance. And that was the maiden flight of that. And on another occasion, I was in a helicopter and followed it. I tracked it in over the MCG on grand final day, and they sailed it between the posts. Views from hot-air balloons. That's the MCG. Not on grand final day, obviously. You can make up a joke about it before you tell me that, couldn't you? I photographed cars. I did a project for the City of Knox on car club culture a couple of years ago. That was great fun. And you just wander around with a camera. I love wandering around with a camera, shooting what you can see. Floppy dice. I think I might get some of those. That's taking car club culture. Melbourne, I photographed Melbourne. As a photographer, you tend to become a collector of images. You put sets of images together, and I start with something, and then if it builds into something, it becomes a project. But I've done quite a lot of work on Melbourne, and I continue to. And of course, I've got the access of flying over Melbourne, so I can get low altitude shots and beautiful foggy mornings. You can see some really wonderful things. Now that's from a project that I'm in a group called Map Group. Map Group did Beyond Regional Drought that we talked about earlier, and it's been basically about taking groups of photographers to country towns and recording the life of a country town and then presenting the images back to the community. So as we say, it's holding a mirror up to the community. And this year we decided to do a piece called, well, we actually named it Little Big Town, which we thought was quite nice. It was all the small streets and laneways of Melbourne. And then it's on show at the Treasury Museum in Spring Street at the moment. It's on for a couple of months if you're in town and got nothing to do for an hour or two. Go and have a look at it. But they changed the name, and they didn't like Little Big Town, which I thought was a really, really good name. Piece of something. I just take a photo of this place, and this guy walked by and he decided to hand it up for the camera, and got quite a nice shot of it. Always expect the unexpected. That's a Melbourne fashion show, and it's, I always think it's a bit of a men are from Mars, women are from Venus moment. It's wonderful when things like that just present themselves in front of you and you just got to look at the camera and go bang. 1994, I was lucky enough to look at the human heart and the body, and when I've had a lot of young students work over the years, and I say one of the great things about photography is you can go where you want with it, you can see what you want. And sure, doctors and nurses and other medical staff get to see a human heart and the body, but nobody else does generally. And to be able to go in and see that was something kind of really special for me. It was also kind of weird in the long term because that was 1994, and halfway through the operation I was invited into the adjoining theatre in the Austin Hospital, and a guy called Bob Jones invited me in to have a look at a liver transplant. So I went and I saw a body laid out there with an 11-hour operation, and the liver was out and there's this huge cavity in the body. And little did I know that 16 years later he'd be operating on me. So it's kind of weird. This is an ambulance officer. I was riding shotgun with an ambulance officer, and he's reviving a young girl, or about to revive a young girl from a heroin overdose in Melbourne at RMIT in 1998. I actually had another more graphic shot to go with that, but I thought I'd leave it out. I spent 2 weeks following heroin dealers and addicts around Smith Street during the epidemic for Time magazine. It's a big storm down on Frankston Pier, and I just love the guy on the right. He just sits there and watches the water. And he just gently gets up, sits down and keeps fishing. You've got to hand it to fishing. They're pretty dedicated. Yeah, there's a few other things I've just picked up along the way. That was not an easy photograph to take. There was around about 200 goes of putting a cat up there, and in the end the cat just gave up and went. And he got shot. The funny thing about this shot is it was shot for Who Weekly magazine, and they didn't use it. I still think it's a really lovely shot. I still can't believe they flipped it. I thought it would have been a great cover. This is Greg Gregory, and Greg used to live up the road from I live in the Dandenongs, in Worcester, and Greg used to live up Emerald. And you probably don't know. Does anyone know who this guy is? This guy is an expert climber, and he was the guy who set up the station underneath where Hillary and Tim sang. He basically propelled them to the top. He got them that far. He was an expert climber on the expedition. And the English gentleman, whose name slips me, who was the expedition leader, Hunt, that's right, Hunt threw him a camera and said, oh, by the way, you're the photographer. And he went on to become a really significant photographer and did a beautiful book on Blackpool and people holidaying at Blackpool. And he told me actually one time, does anyone know of a photographer named Henri Cartier-Bresson? Henri Cartier-Bresson is probably one of probably regarded as the greatest photographer ever. And when he had a small tourist business in Blackpool, and he said one day there's a knock at the door, and this man, a Frenchman, introduced himself as Henri Cartier-Bresson, and he'd come to the meeting because he'd heard so much about him and seen his photographs. So that would, that's like being people like Bill Gates coming to say hello to you if you're a computer programmer, I guess. Pretty special. David Russell, who Fiji Gully boxer, who went on to become world champion. Linda Sabansky. I used to take my own camera when I used to go and do all the Who Weekly shoots back in the 1990s, and then I'd take what they'd want, and then I'd take what I wanted, and I got some lovely photos along the way. And I've always liked that photo magnet. And most young people don't know how this guy is anymore. It's really always amazing, man. It's always such a shame because it was such a great sort of piece of Australian history in 1958. Won that race. And I heard a lovely story about his trainer saying to him after he went out on that first day of the super marathon from Sydney to Melbourne there, and he was running and everybody retired at the end of the day, and Cliff kept going. And Cliff said to his trainer, he said, can we stop now? Can we stop now? And the trainer said, Cliffy, you keep running until I see your eyes bleed. And Cliffy kept running, and of course he became a national hero. Great underdog story. Over in New York. I do a little bit of food photography. I'm not really very good at it, but that's one of the shots I'm really quite like. The fish looks a bit surprised at being photographed. I like landscape, and I worked under my mentor was a photographer named John Cato, who died earlier this year, and John was a great landscape photographer. His father had been probably the Collins Street photographer of the 1930s. And wrote the history of the camera in Australia at the time in a biography called I Can Take It. John taught me quite a lot, but it took me a long time to get a handle on photographing landscape properly and really working out how to do it. It's never as easy as it looks, but I'm getting a few shots together slowly but surely. I did a project on Orangutan last November. They had their 100th anniversary, and I went up with a designer and a youngish rider named Adam McNichol. And they wanted just a basic history for the town. And Adam, who came from Orangutan, said, look, we can make it better than this. And we sure did. We went up there and we photographed all the people. He recorded the stories. We used a blend of contemporary photos and historic photographs, and we ended up with quite a lovely book out of it. And this guy was training, this horse is called, it's a pacer now. I was calling it a trotter, and someone said to me, no, it's a pacer. So I learned something last week. A pacer called You Catch 'em, and he trains him out in the wheat field. And once I found that out, I just got out there and tried to do a few laps and got that shot. And that was just before the rain came and basically ruined the wheat crop. It was a fantastic looking crop last year. I've been photographing wheat harvesting for quite a while actually, and these are just some frames that I took in the 1990s. And again, I think just before the nation, a lot of people were and what they're doing. That guy was actually a boilermaker by trade, and he'd come home to help his dad harvest down in India. The boys at Loxton Silos in South Australia. Show, that's one of the O'Toole brothers from the Royal Melbourne Show. These are some photos that were and weren't used, but I shot during the drought, from up here on Brisbane drought, and I found that fish, I swear to God, I found that fish like that up at the Himuir. I didn't set it up. And there were about 50,000 carp lying around. But that ended up being used in Time magazine in the States quite extensively. This guy's on a low bidgy irrigation area, and he can put his arm down to about there into the cracks in the ground. And he had great, it uses a floodplain to grow wheat. And they had 20 crops in a row, which is pretty good in wheat growing term. And then he'd had 10 years of nothing. And he was just about to give up. But the rains came, fortunately, just in time for him. The Hay Plain, one of the flattest areas in the world. And one of the weediest areas in the world, I've got to say. That's out in the outback of South Australia. I'm scratching my head to remember the name at the moment, but this guy was just, the crop had failed, the sheep had come in and eaten what was left of it, and he was just tending a small patch of melons at Dutton. That's another area in South Australia. And I know you guys probably had a pretty tough time with the drought down here, but you had nothing compared to what they had up in western New South Wales. And 2003, into 2002, 2003, and this guy, he's, when I met him, he just said to me, I can still remember the first words he said to me was, "This job sucks." And it was dust storms, it was hand feeding sheep with something called mollyphos, which is like a treacle-like substance which gives them black faces, and just watering them. And he'd lost about 3,000 head of sheep that just keeled over, and the sand would just gradually cover them. And, it was pretty hard going out there in those days. Those guys really hung on up in southwestern New South Wales and midwestern New South Wales. So that's Moscow, which is between sort of Ivanhoe and Hay, I guess. And the tree kind of symbolises what's going on. That's the graveyard on the property, Moscow Station. But they've got another bit of forest. Homestead's about 100 metres left, and then there's another forest. And in the other forest, they found another set of tombstones, which they didn't know existed. And they've been there for a couple of generations. That's how bad things got. They were just unearthed by the lack of foliage. That's him looking out from the shearing shed at the drought. One of his sheep. Graham Mansell, who's in the Stockman's Hall of Fame, he's a drover out in the Hay Plain. I'm starting to put together some droving shots, and hopefully I'll get a project going on that. I love the dogs, you know. I took this photo out at Lake Erie when I was up ballooning last year. Not from the balloon, obviously. I was crawling on my hands and knees to get that. But I really like it. It says a lot of, I don't know what it says. It says a bit about drought and a bit about life and death, and it's fairly symbolic to me. It won a prize called the New North Prize at the end of last year, and that enabled me to have an exhibition which is currently on in Melbourne at the moment. That was it was all the funding to do the show, and I've blown that image up. Well, the actual image is bigger than that now, and you can see things on the original, like there's a mite on the back of the locust, which is pretty incredible. That's the guy who's standing before the drive. I said we've had the 10 years of drought, and that's at Lake Tala, which is just north of Balramont, and that gum tree is just standing on its roots. He emailed me the other day, and he sent me a photograph, and the lake's full. And it's really quite symbolic of hanging on, isn't it? You think how many tonne of tree that would be. We saw some pretty wicked storms up there too. There's a place called Widger in New South Wales. He came through and dumped, during the drought, dumped about an inch of rain and went back to being drought again. But for a photographer it was pretty exciting. Bushfires in the Dandenongs, it's 1998. And this is one of these photos that you sort of wonder whether you should take or not, but when I got there I actually asked the gentleman if I could take a photo before I took it, and he was okay with it, and so I'm okay with it too. Star Ferry in Hong Kong, I've done a little bit of travelling, not a wide amount. I should have done a lot more, and I didn't really get overseas until I was 40, but since then I've done a little bit of travelling, including 3 trips to Italy on the subway and run. And That's sort of one of those photos I wonder if he's going to get up and sort of go you for taking the photo. It was worth taking. And sometimes you've got to summons up a little bit of courage to take photos you really want to take. I can't run very fast anymore either. That's in Lucca in Tuscany, on top of a tower called the Guinigi Tower, and there's 7 HOLM oak trees that grow out of the top of one of those towers, like the one you can see in the middle, and everybody goes up there. And I was just sitting there, and these couples were there, and it just sort of all fell into place. There's, serendipity plays a really important role in photography. I'm going to do a book on Italy. I don't know, I haven't got a publisher, I don't know if 5 miles interested in it. I just badger people until I get the book happening. But this is one I want to call it Visions of Italy, and that's the cover. I'm just going to have Visions of Italy across there. I think it's kind of nice. I might need to go and do another trip over there. Yep. Elvis impersonator in Times Square. That's the World Trade Center in 2008. I was still digging it out, which was pretty, that amazed me that they were still excavating the site. Actually saw a photograph in New York the other day, and the new building's coming right out of there now. It's looking quite spectacular. And New Yorkers were quite different the last time I was in New York. I think the World Trade sort of Center collapse, the bombings and that had really affected them, and they were less that sort of don't waste my time, don't get in my face, because that sort of tough New Yorker thing, that tended to be a bit more mellow the last time I was there. That's Lucca in Italy. And that's Worth Square in New York in 1998, and I just thought, well, Worth Square, that's sleeping on the streets. Oh, what have I done? Sorry, I jumped that one. That's, I'm trying to remember his name. That was taken. He claims he's the unclaimed ferret racing king of Australia. The granddaughter's feral sheriff, and his hobbies and drink include, fishing, shooting and drinking VB. That's what he told me. And he looks at that. Hudson Stores, now you country people know Hudson Stores, sure. You know it's Hudson Stores or new Hudson Stores. Yeah, it's got to be a few. You go down to town and you want that belt for your piece of machinery that hasn't been made for 70 years. You went to Hudson Stores and they had everything there. It was a wonderful place. And it just disappeared. And again, it sort of says why you photograph things. Why it's so important. Okay, so to the main event. I hope I'm not putting you to sleep here. Is that not going on too long? I hope not. I started photographing shearing sheds in 1976. I went out with a girl at college who was on a sheep property in central Victoria, just fell in love with it. And these are some of the shots that I've taken over the years, I guess. That's one of my signature shots, funnily enough. Sorry, let's jump to. It's one of those shots everyone reacts to. It's shot for a story for the Age at the time, and it's just called Shearer's Backside. Yeah. It was shot at Foster too, so it's not that far away from here. And a guy called Neil Dunstan, and unfortunately Neil died in an accident a couple of years ago, but his backside's known. It's well remembered now. This is the guy, Walkie, what have we got here? He's on the cover, he's a different, this is a shot of him on the cover of Black and White book, The Shearers. And he was a lovely guy, Aboriginal shearer up at Hay, but loved to drink, and the drink took him, unfortunately, at the end of the day. But one of those really intense portraits where there's quite an art to just meeting a person for the first time, getting in close and saying, "I want to take a photo," and getting that sort of level of intensity in a portrait. And you can never guarantee what you're going to get when you take a portrait. You can always get a photo that looks like the person, but getting a photo that often travels beyond that and becomes really intense, I think is pretty hard to get, and there's no formula for it. It's just a bit of luck, I think. That's hanging out I think of the name of the shed. It's a big shed, Coonable at Colliangley in New South Wales, and they run 28 shearers in a row. It's still today. It's a big shed by modern standards, and the old shed's next door, and if you look at my book Woolsheds, I don't know if I've got I might have the frame here. There's a beautiful various Woolpress stands inside the old shed, and then the rest of the floor's been taken out, and they just let use it for housing sheep. Hopefully, it might be in this collection. Otherwise, you'll have to go and have a look at the shop. It's well worth looking at. It's in Woolsheds. That's just out on the road. That's with whenever I go away with a couple of mates. Usually, a mate who'll do the driving, because I love sleeping when we're on the road. I just fall asleep all the time, and usually take it up a photographer or a mate Kip or something like that, and we go off and do trips. And that's just sunrise one morning, taking some shots. That's Kip, and his walking stick at the time on the way back from Lake here. We're at Mount Lyndhurst Station, and that's a 3.5 million acre property on the Struzelake track. That's Arkava Station in the Flinders Ranges, and you can actually go on holiday there. They've got quite a nice accommodation set up there, but it's a working property, and you wouldn't get too many properties that are more spectacular than that for a backdrop. Very, very, very nice. Probably the final, these are all images, so I should have prefaced this by saying these are images from Woolsheds. This is Walker Station and Walker Shearing Shed, and it was built in 1924. It's probably the find of the book in historical terms, and I think it would be one of, you can contradict me tonight if you want, but I reckon it's one of the rarest farm buildings in Australia today. It was built in 1924 by a father and his two sons, and it was built out of Murray pine and cane grass from Frome Lake up near Tibbooburra, and they carted in about 50 kilometres on the back of an old T-model Ford and thatched the walls and thatched the roof, and it was still being used as a crushing shed in 2001. So it survived bushfires, drought, flood, every shearers, it's survived everything. And quite an interesting building. It's a real shame. It's sitting 17 kilometres off the road, so it's just too remote for anybody to go unless you knew where to find it. And it's not likely that someone's going to come along and damage it, but except Mother Nature's what you've got to really worry about. I don't know what you do with a building like that. I don't know if you go, well, one of the museums or one of the universities should buy it, pull it apart and reassemble it somewhere and look after it, or whether you just leave it and let it go to ruin. I'm not quite sure what the right thing to do is. There's a guy called Jack Robb from Rubicon, and Jack tells a lovely story about how he and his brother went up with the old Fergie and grabbed the logs and got some old sawmill equipment from up above Rubicon and made a saw bench and milled the logs, and then built this two-stand shearing shed for the family in the 1950s. And it's a lovely tale about how things have changed, I guess. They just did it all themselves with whatever they had. And he's just on the border of starting to lose his memory, I think. And it was lovely to get the story down and talk about that. They were very lucky. They just survived the bushfires in 2007. They burned right up to their back fence. That's one of what they call the red sheds up at Jewellery, and it's called the Yanko. Beautiful shed, built I think in the 1920s. Now, you'll have to forgive me because I can't, off the top of my head, remember the name of the shed, but I'll tell you where it is. It's just north of the Barrier Ranges, out of Broken Hill, on the way up to Tibbooburra. It's done on a trip in June last year. And the shed was built before the homestead. The foundations weren't fantastic at the time. Probably, the family were the first family to take sheep north of the Barrier Ranges. So I guess you're talking about 1860s. And the wife went on to have 13 children and lost all but one of them. The husband then took off droving cattle up to the Northern Territory from there, and died riding a sulky through town. He was standing up riding through town, I suspect he might have been pissed, and fell off into his head and died, and she carried on with the farm. So, this shed, Patsy Adams Smith in the book this year has referred to this as the sweat extractor, and it's Isis Downs at Isis Spit in Queensland in Longreach. and previous owner was the late Kerry Packer. Ice was down to just finish shearing for us before I got there in 2005, which was a great shame. But it was the first shed to have electricity. It was the first shed to use trucks to move the wool, from what they say. And they also had the presses and the cranes all driven by steam-powered rams. So it was technologically quite an advanced shed for its day. The roof trussing was made by the same company that built the Sydney Harbour Bridge. There's a lot of great stories about the shed. Some people say it's a semicircle, and some people say, oh, they cut it in half, and now half exists in South America, but that's not true. Yeah, that's true. Now, that's sharing down in Tasmania. This is out in the Flinders Ranges. This is Ingarachina shed, and it's built out of Murray pine, and it's all very, very original. It was a very cold, -4 degrees morning out there in the Flinders, but absolutely stunning shed with the stick gates and everything's mortised in and Murray pine logs. And I like the little sheds that, you know, doing it tough, and this one's doing it tough out just on the other side of Barra heading towards the Flinders Ranges. And I reckon it should be a hard day's work working out there in the South Australian heat. Doing your 200 sheep a day. That's Woolsheds shed, and the old Ferrier's 521, I think it is, yeah, 591 Ferrier's wool press. And I've been chasing down Ferrier's wool presses, and I'll come down a bit about that in a minute. That's a beautiful shed again. An old press at Woolmers at Tasmania. I don't know if anyone's been to Woolmers. They have the National Rose Garden there at Longford, and it's a great place for blokes and girls, because the girls can go and look at the roses, and the blokes can go and look at an 18-19 shearing shed. It's really quite a beautiful shed. Lately, you know, this book has been highly successful so far. It's only been out for about 7 weeks, Woolsheds, and I had a lot of open matter from it, and I decided that I'd be silly not to do a follow-up book. So at the moment I'm travelling around, and I've probably got to visit all states by June and to produce a second volume. So you're the first lot of people to probably see these images. These are just some recent things I've shot since September. That's shearing up at Hay. It's going to probably focus more on the people than the sheds. There will be new sheds in this book, but at the moment I wanted to complement the other book. The other book's more shed focused. This book will be more people focused with a few sheds. That's the old Tuppunwell shed down on the Oxley River, which was a staging shed for taking most of the wool out of the district up there. Most of these shots, I'll take them off with a little audio recorder, and I go and I talk to people and they tell me the history, so I can keep it as accurate as possible. That's just the shed I saw on the way home down at the back of Melbourne, down near, I think of the name of it. Anyway, don't worry. Northern Melbourne. This guy rang me up, the guy on the left, Bill Douglas. He comes from Woolsthorpe down in Hamilton, or down sort of South Hamilton. And he said, oh, I got a couple of old wool presses, because he saw the section I'd done on wool presses in the book. And he came to me and he said, I've got this screw press, and I think I've got the first ever Ferrier's wool press. And each Ferrier's wool press has got a number on it. But this is the screw press, and you can see that with most technological innovation, they borrow what was there before to make what comes after. And for those of you who are familiar with the Ferrier's wool press, there'll be quite a few in here, I suspect, who are. You know, it has those. It's got the double box. It's got the big beams on each side, the cross piece. They went on. You know, he went to a farm sale and got this. Oh, hang on. I'm going to make a fool out of myself here. I'll come back to the Ferrier's wool press. Hold that thought. This is Ted Hall from Alexandria, who proves the point that evolution breeds in adversity. He lost his left hand up to just below the elbow in a fish mincer in 1954 or somewhere like that. And it's quite a good story in a sense. he's put his hand in the mincer and it's been chewing up his arm. Sorry to be a bit bloody about that. And there's a button over there on the wall that's about the size of a 10-cent piece, and he can't reach it to turn the machine off. And his arm's being dragged in. And he has a piece of pipe. And he gets the piece of pipe and he goes, well, I guess the other arm's like that. And he goes like that, and he hits the 10-cent piece size switch and turns the machine off. And you know, he's always worked. He's always been a working bloke all his life. He went on to shear quite a lot. Still shears in his 70s up around like Alex, just those hobby farms and things. And he also used a chainsaw, which is a pretty good feat, I reckon. And he's happy with it. He loves it. He just loves it. He's a lovely guy. And you know what he does for a hobby? He knits. Not just knits, he knits my wife this beautiful set of green and red and black and white socks, and it's got a little redback spider on each sock. So he's pretty good. These shots are very contemporary now. These were taken on Friday, Thursday and Friday up around Hamilton. And it was 30, 31 degrees. It was pretty hot in the shed. The guys were working pretty hard, working up a pretty good sweat. And this guy's just checking his blades. He ran a couple of sheep through the blades for us to show us New Zealand sheep. He does 30,000 sheep a year with blades. And that's the book, and that's what I've got to tell you. Okay, so if you've got any questions,